Welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. We are entering the Mayfield Matrix, like it or not. Doug Lesmerises, Patsko, Ashley Bastock, Dan Labbe, and Mary Kay Cabot. This is what we're going to do for the next couple of days. We're going to look at the options the Browns could have with Baker Mayfield. Now that they have said Baker Mayfield will be back in year 5 as the Browns starting quarterback, we want to see, like, what would you guys do if you were in charge of running the Browns? And we're going to roll out 5 scenarios over the next couple of days on cleveland.com and written pieces, and then also here in podcast form, hopefully smart, short podcast form, about these 5 options. And the 5 options are sort of linked to what has happened with some other recent quarterbacks, other recent decisions that teams had. The options are these: stick with Baker Mayfield in his 5th year with no extension, but he's clearly the guy. And the comparison for that is what Jameis Winston did in year 5 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The other options are bring in a solid, pretty good veteran as some sort of backup or competition, draft a quarterback as some sort of backup or competition, actually sign Mayfield to some kind of maybe small extension, which is what happened with Blake Bortles, or actually have him not be here. That the Browns are saying this now, but is there some world where maybe the Browns would trade him for a different quarterback like the Rams did with Jared Goff? But we are going to focus on the Jameis Winston option, which is what the Bucs did in year 5. And Dan, we'll start with this because you sort of brought this up. There is a pretty remarkable statistical comparison between Jameis Winston and Baker Mayfield. They were both Heisman Trophy winners. They were both the number 1 overall pick in their drafts. And they both, through 4 years, at least on the stat sheet, were pretty similar.
Yeah, and it's so close. Like, I almost think there's an error on Pro Football Reference. Like there's some sort of number that's wrong or something. But Baker has played more games, but it's completion percentage for both 61.6%. This is over their first 4 years. So this is not including Jameis's 5th year when he threw 30 interceptions. This is just the first 4 years for each guy. Jameis 14,628 yards, Baker 14,125 yards. Baker 92 touchdowns to 88 for Winston. Winston 58 interceptions to 56 for Baker. Their quarterback rating, identical, 87.8 over their first 4 years. And honestly, even when you factor in rushing, I mean, Jameis is not really a runner, so he's only got about 200 more rushing yards than Baker over his first 4 years. Sacks, Baker 134, Jameis 122. Very, very similar numbers. I would recommend any listener out there go to Pro Football Reference, find their player comparison, put in the first 4 years for Jameis. And it's kind of jarring how I didn't expect them to be that similar.
So Jameis Winston had a year, I think it was in year 4, where he was suspended at the start of the year for 3 games. He had Ryan Fitzpatrick in there with him. Fitzpatrick played some in that year, but then Fitzpatrick left for year 5. They brought in Blaine Gabbert, who was kind of like a meh. Jameis Winston, when he came back in year 5, played like practically every single snap for Tampa. They were all in with that dude. He led the NFL in passing yards. He led the NFL in interceptions. And then he was gone after year 5, and they dropped Tom Brady right in the Jameis Winston slot and won the Super Bowl. So that's the scenario. There's one other somewhat similar year 5 scenario that works out a little better for the quarterback and the team that we can talk about. But let's talk about this idea that it's Baker and basically only Baker. That they are not trying to give themselves another option in 2022. Who likes that idea? Who thinks that is an interesting, good path for the Browns and the quarterback? He's back, no extension, but he's clearly the guy.
I like it. I like it because of what we saw in 2020. I mean, clearly his career has been a roller coaster. It's been up and down. And the fact that he hasn't put together 2 back-to-back questionable seasons, I think is why we're here. If this season had happened in, obviously, in Stefanski's first year, it's a different scenario altogether. But the fact that we saw him play at a really high level and have this offense performing at a high level in 2020, I think makes me want to see what he can do healthy again with that continuity that he had coming into this past season, and perhaps with some maybe more consistency from receivers around him.
I also want to ask a specific thing about the potential pros of an approach like this. Does anyone believe that committing in a full-throated way to Baker Mayfield is in itself something that may help him play better, right? That the commitment itself would maybe lead to the best version of Baker Mayfield you could get?
You know what? I'm going to say yes to that because I think that so many things went wrong this season offensively. And if you really dig in, there were a lot of things on his plate as a player that just did not go well around him at all. And we've talked about them a lot, but just very, very quickly, injured tackles, no Kareem Hunt. Odell bolts in the middle of the season. He gets injured. Kevin has to call plays a certain way. His confidence waned. And so, yes, I do think a full commitment to Baker Mayfield would actually make a big difference. And I think a rebuild of the confidence is huge. And that's one of the reasons why I might advocate trying to bring back a Jarvis Landry to help with Baker's confidence and give him someone like that he feels comfortable with. Also, that's why I wouldn't be completely opposed to Case Keenum coming back in this situation, as opposed to having him look over his shoulder at a Mitch Trubisky. So just in sticking with this plan, a Case Keenum is his sounding board. A Case Keenum is his mentor, somebody that he doesn't have to worry about is going to come in and steal his starting job, but that he can confide in and be there for. So in terms of Baker coming back, this is not the worst option that you could possibly have.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything Mary Kay said. I mean, I think when you look at Baker, I don't know that he is kind of like a player. Like I obviously just did that huge story on JOK where like he told me he essentially looks at Twitter and seeks out negative comments about himself sometimes because he needs that. I think Baker's kind of the opposite. I think sometimes he maybe has two like rabbit ears in that regard when he shouldn't. I think in his mind, a lot of his issues this year had to do with his injury. So if the team does do this, it kind of gives him that reassurance that like, okay, we're on the same page. They still think I can do this. And I think when you look at his career, he's kind of a quarterback, and we've talked about this multiple times, that everything has to be perfect around him. It has to kind of be a perfect storm. And that's fine if you want to go that route, but I think that would become part of it too.
I'm like that on Twitter too. I seek out negative comments about myself, but then when I see them,
Well,
I
it's
just
probably
feel
easier for you than JOK to find those.
I seek out negative comments about Doug too.
Do we think that I am